Today on Locked On Red Wings, end of season player evaluations.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley, and it is a midnight premiere. We are back on schedule.
We're so back.
Because, and Scotty loves it when I bring this up, my computer's fixed. He thinks that everyone cares a ton about the state of my computer. So we are back on schedule now with the midnight releases, and today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. You got to admit it, you got a competitive side, and if you do, there's nothing better to scratch that itch than Monopoly Go. The mobile hit is a twist on the classic Monopoly, so join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Scotty, very straightforward few episodes for us. We're in off-season mode, which means it's that time of year, player evaluations. But I think it's going to be fun. You know, in the midseason evaluations, we changed it up instead of doing player grades, because grades are so, I mean, it's all subjective in the end, right? Like our evaluations are so subjective, but I feel like grades are even more subjective, because what's a C compared to somebody else's B compared to somebody else's D? So what we're doing is a tier list like we did in the midseason, where it's above and beyond our personal expectations of that player, exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, below expectations, failing expectations. That's how we're going to do it. I think it's a little bit more straightforward and simplistic. And again, this is subjective to our opinions on what the expectations were of that player. So if you have your own, in fact, when this is all said and done, I'll tweet out the tier list and you guys can use it to make your own tier list. So please do so. But without further ado, first of all, Scotty, while I'm getting ready, how are you doing? How was your... Well, technically,
How was my last half an hour since we talked last? It was pretty good, man. Had a work call. That's why that's why it was even 30 minutes. But yeah, doing pretty well. That's why we're wearing the same clothes as we were on yesterday's show too. We're recording this, 30 minutes after the last one ended.
I changed it up a little bit. No hat, contacts instead of glasses.
Oh, so you see, I didn't really even want to put on the illusion that this was a different day. I just straight up just showed up.
Even though I'm drinking coffee out of the same mug and wearing the same T-shirt.
Right. You at least change it up a little bit.
Yeah. Also brushed my teeth because I had some awful coffee breath. But then I got one more cup of coffee anyways because the pot was still brewing.
So, yeah, that's helpful.
Defeated the purpose. Scotty, let's get into the player evaluations. That's what people are here for. We're going to lead it off with a banger. We're not going to bury the lead. We're going to keep your interest here for at least a little bit. Let's lead off with
the easiest one we do.
Probably will. And I think it was the easiest one we did in midseason evaluations as well. I'll lead it off with Patrick Kane. Scotty, where would you rank Patrick Kane in the expectations tier list?
This is a absolute slam dunk failing. No, it's not. This is a slam dunk above and beyond expectations, obviously. Look, we have to remember, and we don't forget our expectations of what of Patrick Kane going in. I was one of the people that was rather sour on the entire idea just because of how low my expectations were for him this year. And he was absolutely remarkable. There's really, in my eyes, there's really not even an argument for anything besides just straight up above and beyond. He was fantastic. He was one of the best point producers on the entire team. The locker room loved him. He was absolutely stellar.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I thought Patrick Kane, it speaks for itself. Point per game. He proved that people can come back from this surgery that has ended many, many more careers than it has saved in its time as a procedure. And I think without a doubt, there's not really much more that needs to be said about Patrick Kane. He's a slam dunk above and beyond expectations. He was good. He was very good for the Detroit Red Wings down the stretch.
Yeah.
Next up, Scotty, the most handsome player on the team, Ben Sherratt. Ben Sherrocket, honestly, Man Rocket.
Absolutely.
This is a guy in midseason evaluations we had exceeding expectations. And I personally don't see, in my personal opinion, you might have a different opinion, I don't see that changing, especially as after Woolman got hurt, he was asked to step back into that role on the top pair with Moritz Seider, which he struggled at last season. Remember, last season he came in with, there were lofty expectations for a guy you signed for 4x4. You were thinking this guy's got to be your top pair D-man, and he struggled in that role. This season with Jeff Petrie, he was playing better hockey. We have our thoughts on Jeff Petrie as a defenseman. Definitely some overexposure, but we're talking about Ben Sherratt. Ben Sherratt throughout the season was having a better year. And then when he got paired with Moritz Seider, I thought he played even better. And that might be partially a Seider effect, but I also just think like they had better chemistry this year than they had all last year. For me, like this is an easy exceeding expectations for Ben Sherratt based on what I thought going into the year, just because of what he did down the stretch with Moritz Seider, which is where he was at the midseason.
Yeah, no, I'm lockstep with you. I think this is a really easy exceeding expectations, and I think, unfortunately, part of that is just because of how much he struggled last year, and we were kind of comparing the sample size that we had, which was a pretty subpar and not very great season that he had. Well, I guess now 2 seasons ago. Now that that this past year is probably a season ago, but this is a really easy exceeding expectations. He was solid, and yeah, we talked about it a lot. That point that you brought up there at the end, where he when he was first brought on, it was him and Seider, and he struggled so much that they had to switch that pairing up. And this year they went back to it with the Wallman injury, and it worked out pretty well. But even before that, I mean, not that he certainly has his flaws. This isn't, saying that he's, one of the best players on the wings or should be your top pair defenseman going into the fall or anything of the sort. But this is a guy that I think took a noticeable step forward this season for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. We got time for another one. We're kind of flying through this early on. Yeah. They're making it easy so far. JT Compher next up on this list. And, this is a guy that coming into the year you signed and you were hoping yet again in the second year in a row, you were going to replace or find rather your second line center. And he just didn't kind of step into that role as much as you would hope. Like he was the second line center, but he doesn't look like a second line center. But at the same time, he did set a new career high in goals. I thought he was pretty much as advertised based on what everyone was saying about him as a player. I don't have really anything bad or like too overwhelmingly positive to say about JT Compher. I think he pretty much almost to the T gave us the player we were expecting. If anything, I was coping with the fact that, or hoping rather, that he could be a second line center, but that's just not who he is. But that doesn't mean he didn't meet expectations. He was through and through very consistent the entire season at being the player he always has been, while setting again a new career high in goals. I like JT Compher a lot. We've said it. I think we said it in yesterday's episode, that he on a Stanley Cup roster is probably a 3C. But I think he was as advertised. So I think he's for me, a very easy meeting expectations kind of player.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're lockstep again here on the first three. I think, there were some questions about his contract when he first signed, and, his role on the team was obviously going to be that 2C. And while he didn't, again, we talk about the future of the team, and everybody kind of wants a more solidified 2C and move Compher down to 3C. That's fine. But, in terms of the type of player that we thought we were getting, I think we pretty much got that. We weren't expecting him to be one of the most like productive players on the team as far as points go, but he provided a lot defensively, which is a big thing for this team as well. And I think that he kind of was fine. He was good and solid in whatever role they put him in. They moved him around a little bit there at the midway point in the season. So yeah, I think this is a pretty easy meeting expectations for me too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to head to a quick break, and when we return, we're going to keep the ball rolling. I think next up we got Andrew Kopp. That's Andrew Kopp, the perpetual scowl that is Andrew Kopp. So we'll talk about that in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We'll stop talking about evaluations for a second because we got to talk to you guys about the hit twist on the classic game for your mobile devices, and that is Monopoly Go. You can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, and cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Also, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Segment 2, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. Let's get right back into it. We're doing player grades. We did 3 in segment 1. Let's see if we can keep that pace up for segments 2 and 3.
We won't.
We won't. Probably not. We'll probably talk about one guy for like 10 minutes and be like, oh, crap, we're rambling. Let's move on. But that's how we be. You guys have been here long enough. You know how we are. Andrew Kopp, the perpetual scowl, as I joked, because I've never seen this guy smile in my entire life. He is...
It's an interesting one, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy we're going to ramble about this episode. I can feel it in my bones. Man, he was asked to play a more checking role, a much more defensive-oriented role, and he mentioned that in his postseason media availability, and that's why his production took a dip. He did score 13 goals this season, I believe, which was more than the 9 he scored last year. He went on a little bit of a heater when the team went on a heater in January or February. I can't exactly remember which month it was, but he finished the season with just 33 points. Man, I don't know when it comes to Andrew Kopp where to rank him, because that's 9 points fewer than what he got last year, but he was getting less minutes with the addition of JT Compher, and he was playing a much more defensive role now with the addition of JT Compher as well. And you put on a line with Rasmussen and Fisher for the bulk of the season. Like, how much offense do you think that line's going to get you? But at a certain point, also, Scotty, you're paying this guy $5 million for another 3 years. You've already paid him $5 million for the last 2. And, he had decent point production last year, despite no goals. 42 assists was the second highest in his career, or 42 points was the second highest in his career. But this year that took a step back. So it's when trying to grade where Andrew Kopp is, I mean, I guess, what were our expectations of him at the beginning of the year? I'm like, this is a guy where, we definitely asked for more goals out of him, and probably assists to stay the same. And we got more goals, but a lot fewer assists, but in a different, again, this is where I sound like we're going to ramble, because it's hard to pick Andrew Kopp. Before I give one, do you have an area you think that he belongs in? I don't know.
It's one of two. For me, this is either meeting or below. And I've kind of gone back and forth in my head a lot.
We had him at meeting expectations in the midseason evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
But that was after he was on a heater, and he significantly cooled off in the second, after the All-Star break.
I feel like big picture, this is a pretty easily below, right? If we're doing, if you're talking, expectations of him when pen hit paper, I think that most of the fan base would agree that this is a pretty easy below expectations from what kind of production we've got out of him so far in his Wings tenure as a whole. But his expectations changed after his, I guess, lackluster, his up and down year 1. It's really tough. For me, again, it's either meeting or below. I really don't have too much of an issue with either.
Yeah. I think
it's just tough because, sure, you could have asked for more points for sure, but he was on a line like that with Fisher and Rasmussen for a lot of the season. I think it's ridiculous to expect a huge uptick in points from any of those guys when that's the line they were rolling out there was pretty clearly a defensive line, but also, to your point, when the team got hot, that third line got hot and was producing offensively. So there's a lot of give and take with Andrew Copp.
Yeah, I think it's fair to put him in below expectations, but then make a note that like different things were asked of him, but
For
just
sure.
based on, pen to paper, what you're paying him for, you need to be able to develop a little bit. It's a tough one. This is probably the guy who we will have and fans might not agree with us, but us personally, the two of us probably at the end of this, we'll look back and review, and maybe we'll change our minds at the very end of it all. But for now, we'll put him in below expectations. But you're right. Like, because expectations from the team for him changed, it's tough to evaluate that because obviously we want more points. We're talking in circles. We've established this.
Right.
TLDR. We want more.
The expectations when he signed the contract was to be a 2C. As
Yeah.
anything close to that? Heck no, right? Like, not even close, obviously. But this season, you brought in Comfer and you put him on a different line with different players. It's certainly, that's a lot different of an ask for sure.
Yeah. So TLDR, he was asked to do something very different this season, but when you're making that much money, I think it's still fair to expect a little bit more offensively as well. Sure. So we'll put him in below for now. We'll see if that sticks, but that's where we're going to place him. Next up, Robbie Fabry. I think this is an easy one, actually. I think this is, for me personally, like an easy meeting expectations. And honestly, like, he was asked to play a bottom six role this season. He got a couple opportunities in the top six, but like the team had a lot more options than that. He was half a point per game, just about 32 points in 68 games played. He's played the most game, and this is the biggest thing for Robbie Fabry. He's played the most games, second most games in his career next to his rookie season where he played 72. 68 games, the second most games he's played in a single season in his career. He had 32 points, which is tied for the second highest in his career. Again, only behind his rookie season where he had 37, and he tied his career high in goals. Like, point production wise from the bottom six, he gave you exactly what to expect out of Robbie Fabry. He was exactly the player you expect. He's not great defensively, but he's going to give you a depth option at goal scoring from down in the bottom six.
Yeah, no, this is a slam dunk meeting for me too. If anything, I want to put him in exceeding just because he played. Like, and that's that's half a joke. Like, obviously the injuries don't reflect him as a player and aren't his fault, quote unquote. But I do think that this is a pretty easy meeting, and I'm just glad we finally got full season, close to a full season of Robbie Fabry for the first time in a while.
Oh, dude, completely agree with you on that one. It's so nice that he was able to stay healthy, just for his own sake, man. Like, that's rough. 3 ACL tears in his, what is still like he's in the first half of his career still on the grand scheme of how long NHL players can possibly play. So just be able to be healthy for a full season, well, nearly a full season. He was hurt with a lower body injury early on, but that was great to see. We're going to head to another quick break, and when we return, we're going to keep this conversation going with the the end of season player evaluations.
I'm so glad I see DeBrincat's face way down the line. I'm so glad we're not getting to that today. We can kick that can down the road and talk about that later this week.
You acting like I didn't do that intentionally.
Well, good job. I prompts that.
You'll note if you take a look at where the notable faces are put on this list.
Yeah, they're kind of spread out.
Very intentional.
Yeah.
To make sure we have quality listenership throughout the week.
Yeah.
So a little behind the curtain look for you guys. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL, and baseball is in full swing. Another series win for the Detroit Tigers. Although we're recording this on Monday, they have to play the Cardinals on Monday night, so we'll know what the vibe. Okay, well, there's that. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. 2006 rather.
6 would be 2006
the year. PTSD. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Next up on our list, Scotty, is one of those players we were just talking about on line 3, Christian Fischer, who shares a namesake with yours truly, although he puts that dastardly C in his last name, whereas I don't, because that's the correct spelling. Christian Fischer, I mean, we love this guy. Our expectations for Christian Fischer were nothing at the start of the year because we knew nothing about this guy, and that's kind of our own fault. But like, we were like, this is our 13th forward, PK specialist. He's not going to get any playing time. And like, he was an everyday player for the Detroit Red Wings this season. In fact, didn't he play nearly every single game for the Detroit Red Wings on this year? Let me double check. He played 79 games. He missed
I think
just
he
3
missed
this
a
season.
couple.
Yeah, he missed just 3 this year, and he became a staple in the bottom 6, a staple shutdown forward, and of course, as we knew going into the season, the only thing we did know about him, a staple in the penalty kill. Like, he's a dog. We love Christian Fischer on this podcast.
Absolute dog. I need you to choose what category he goes in, because I'll put him in above and beyond, dude. I don't care. Like, I'll do it. So I need you to drive this one and put him in exceeding if you want, because I don't need any convincing. I'll put him as high as you let me.
I will push back on you. He had 19 points in 79 games played, which is a step down from, I believe, a career high that he saw the year prior in Arizona.
Yeah,
he saw 27 points in 80 games with Arizona. Granted, a much worse roster, although the Red Wings lost twice to him this year.
Different role on that team.
So he was probably in a boosted role for sure. His average time on the ice, in fact, was with Arizona was nearly 15 minutes, where here in Detroit it was 11 and a half. So he was definitely playing middle 6 in Arizona. But not that we cared that much about plus minus, but on a team that was largely, he was a plus minus 0. Let's leave it at that. So there's not a lot. We don't put much stock in plus minus, but there's just a little sliver of something to be said there. But I mean, again, I'll just repeat it. Our expectations for Christian Fischer coming into the season were like nothing at all. And he exceeded that by becoming one of our favorite players to watch by just being a dog.
Genuinely, on the episode where we acquired him, we were like, yeah, he'll probably be the 13th forward, like whatever.
And well, we were like, why did we even acquire him? Like, what was the point?
And he ended up being not only bottom 6, but solidified third liner on this team the entire year, and was on the PK, like you said, talking in circles now. But yeah, man, I mean, clearly I've made it well known. I absolutely love Christian Fischer. It's been
absolutely
really, really good year for him. That was slick.
Thanks, buddy. Next up on the list, we have Shane Gostisbehere. This one's gonna fill up the rest of our
I'm gonna let you start with this one, because you're you have a lot of opinions on Gostisbehere, I feel like.
I actually you're going to be surprised by what I say. I think he is going to meet expectations for what we thought he was going to be. Because at the beginning of the season, I remember we were talking second pair, third pair. Yeah, I think meet expectations is fine. I mean, he gave us exactly what we were expecting. Granted, a lot of that was secondary assists, not a lot of, he had over 10 goals, which is great from the back end. I feel like a bulk of that came early on in the season when the power play was could not be solved by teams. Remember the first month or 2 of the season, that power play was on fire.
Yeah.
And Shane Gostisbehere is a big part of that. And he sets up a lot of plays that result in goals. But a lot of his points come via secondary assists. But there's something good to be said about that as well. But again, just defensive black hole. And to the point where he was so bad defensively that I don't really want him back, especially with a logjam on defense. I'm okay with giving Seider the opportunity to quarterback that top power play now. And like, you have to give tougher minutes to guys like Seider and your second pair, Petrie and Sherratt, where I think Petrie is overdeployed as is anyways, because defensively that third pair could not handle anything. But you signed Shane Gostisbehere to be your power play driver, to get points, and he did do that. So as much as I have take personal issue with his defensive side of the game, and I don't wish to see him back with the Detroit Red Wings, I do think he met expectations for what we thought he should be doing, and that was get damn near 60 points this season, which is, you can't, don't lie, right? Ball don't lie. 60 points is nearly 60 points is nearly 60 points. So I feel like begrudgingly signing him meeting expectations is the fair thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think meeting expectations is the way to go. I think, I was such a huge fan of this signing. And I think when we were talking about his expectations in, last summer, at the end of last summer, it was a lot of, he should be the highest point producing defenseman and he should help you on the power play. And if the Wings are out of it, he should be one of your biggest trade chips. And if the Wings are in it, then he should be one of your, kind of more valuable assets on there. And I think you saw the give and take from him throughout the year. I don't think I can speak for myself personally. I don't think I realized how much of a defensive black hole he was going to be I don't know, in contrast or hand in hand with his like how many points he produced and how good he was offensively. But I think that the point production is awesome, but it's also because of how you have to deploy him, you severely handicap kind of the flexibility of your blue line at the same time. Like there's a lot less kind of matchups you can play and a lot less flexibility you have when you have a pair that you really are only comfortable deploying off of face-offs in the offensive zone or on the power play. So, I think this is a pretty easy meeting expectations, and I'm not as like anti him coming back as you are, but that's a conversation we can have kind of a little bit later on in the off season. But yeah, I think for now he met what we expected him to do, which was be second, third pair, help on the power play and produce.
Well, and like, for instance, right down the stretch where it felt like nobody was getting any points, that was March and April. He had 17 points in 22 games. Like, he was nearly a point per game in a stretch where nobody was getting points. And like, there is something to be said about that. I think he was just more of a glass cannon player than I was expecting when they got him.
Same.
I wasn't expecting him. I was expecting him to be adequate defensively, at least in a third pair role. And it just wasn't at 5-on-5. It was stressful when he was out there.
No,
but on the power play,
I didn't expect that either. I didn't expect that either, for sure.
Yeah, and like, what was it? 56 points on the year. He's going to lead the free agent class in free agent class of defensemen in points. He's going to get paid by somebody, but I just given what we saw this year, I'm not sure I want that to be us. But at the same time, like, it's also, is he a victim of the system, right? We talk about it. We're a very defensively responsible system. Maybe he'd be better off in a much more run and gun style system, one that thrives off odd man rushes. I mean, he was, again, this is it could be a roster construction question and even a system question, right? Like, is Derek Lalonde creating a system that helps offensively gifted forwards like the ones the Red Wings had this season thrive? I think the answer to that could be very possibly no, right?
Yeah.
That's why you saw a guy like Daniel Sprong, who's very offensively gifted, get scratched because he's a defensive liability and that doesn't fit the system. I don't think that's necessarily wrong because there were a lot of times where he just wasn't trying defensively. But at the same time, like, why are we signing guys that are run and gun type players to a system that is very not run and gun, very sound defensively, and if we take care of our business in our own end, we'll get rewarded in the other end. So there's that little disconnect I feel between Yzerman and Lalonde that I think does have an effect on how some of these players perform. But I think, to be fair, Shane Gostisbehere did exactly what we asked him for. It was just a little bit more extreme on both ends than we were expecting.
Yeah. No, I think that's completely fair. I agree.
I think that's a good place to end it there, Scotty. We don't want to burn through too many of these because we have all off season to record episodes. So we'll lead off tomorrow's episode with the captain, Dylan Larkin. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday's episode of Locked On Red Wings. Scotty, any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We'll be back with a new episode again Wednesday. Sorry, this is just muscle memory to say it like this. Tomorrow, same time, same place, your team every day.
Every day.